2-73A. 1, regarding whether the state board should recommend to the governor that he suspend the members of the DeKalb County Board of Education based on the DeKalb County Board of Education being placed on the level of accreditation or probation for the year 2012-2013. As the parties are aware, the board is utilizing a hearing officer, KP Ray, to assist in conducting the hearing. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hackemeyer, Mr. Wilson, I guess one issue before we move forward, I had during the pre-hearing asked about stipulating to any rulings that I make on the evidence, and I don't know that I ever heard back from both sides, and I want to just make sure on the record that my role right now, if I make any evidentiary rulings, it's going to be a recommendation to the chair for her to adopt or accept, and it's a little bit cumbersome, but based on the advice of the Attorney General's office, that's the role I have right now. We can stipulate to it so that we don't have to have the cumbersome process if we're having to accept it. I don't know that I heard back from either side as to
I don't have any problem with that stipulation, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we did send in a document yesterday afternoon at your request.
Okay.
If I could put something on the record, the morning Madam Chair is going on this board, my name is Bob Orson, and I represent the DeKalb County School System. It is not at all our intention today to try to impede the process. We intend to try to help it smooth. Obviously, there are issues from our side, and I want to preserve the rights of my client on the record. I can do that originally, and I will try to step aside so that things can move quickly and smoothly. We obviously have an objection, which has nothing to do with this board per se, but over the issue of the constitutionality of the statute which we proceed. And we waive none of that going forward. As to the evidentiary issues, we have some standing objections based on hearsay and relevance. I'd like those to be standing objections, and I will try to avoid making individual objections except where I think it is particularly necessary. I'm not going to try to impede this process, and I do not want to throw the chair and hearing officer of the court in a position where it's constantly having to rule on various issues.
Well, let me back on and catch up. I guess my first issue right now, though, is stipulating as to allowing me to make the ruling without having the board chair having to accept or adopt it each time.
Oh.
If you stipulated that, that's all I want to
I have no problem with that. I'm sorry, sir.
Okay, so that's fine. No, that's fine. I understand. I mean, in terms of what I stated yesterday, in terms of any evidentiary rulings, I think we need to preserve them. And whether you want to make it as a general objection, I appreciate moving quickly, but also I want to make sure that whatever record is created is accurate and contains whatever objections that y'all have. And I did receive your objections.
And if that can be placed in the record, Mr. Reddy, I would greatly appreciate it.
No objection. That document was
Yes,
placed in the record.
Thank you.
You would intend to address any of those objections before we move forward, or you just want that as part of the record?
I'd like that to be part of the record. We have a standing objection to all hearsay, double hearsay, and relevancy issues, of which we think there are a significant amount. But I don't want to have to raise them each time because I think it would impede this process and would make the day different than we want it to make.
Well, I do think I don't want to delay any further than we have to, but I do think that at least there's a point when Ms. Hackemeyer tenders any of those exhibits, you'll renew the objection so I can make a ruling at that point. So we do have it on the record. I would appreciate that.
So I will do that at your request. I hope the board members understand I'm doing that at your request.
They understand that. Do y'all have anything further at this point, or are you ready to make a brief opening?
I'm ready to open.
Ready, sir?
One item I have been asked to address is we have a large crowd, and if I could make sure that everyone has turned off any cell phones and everyone gets distracted by that. And in addition, I just also want to make sure this is not a public hearing for comment from the individuals in attendance, and the board has asked that comments, basic discussions, and et cetera be refrained from, and we've asked that everybody respectful of the process here today. With that, I believe the Attorney General's office needs to address one issue.
There was one
Jennifer. I recognize Jennifer Hackemeyer, but you don't know. The board has previously asked me to address the issue of the lawsuits that have been filed. As everybody knows, the DeKalb County has filed 2 lawsuits against the state board, one in federal court, one in state court, challenging the constitutionality of the statute. The Attorney General believes the statute is constitutional, and that the DeKalb County lawsuit will ultimately be unsuccessful. In the meantime, they have also asked both the state judge and the federal judge to enjoin today's proceedings, and both those judges declined to enjoin today's proceedings. And given that 2 separate judges in 2 separate courts have declined to halt today's proceedings, I believe it is appropriate to go ahead while those lawsuits are pending.
Thank you. Ms. Hackemeyer, you ready to proceed?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the State Board of Education, Mr. Hearing Officer. My name is Jennifer Hackemeyer, and I'm here today as a moving party. During the course of this hearing, I believe that the evidence will clearly demonstrate that the triggering event for conducting a hearing under OCGA Section 20-2-73A1 have been satisfied. I believe that after listening to all of the evidence, it will clearly show and demonstrate that the DeKalb County Board of Education receives a failing grade on its report card for school board governance. The DeKalb County school system is accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Council on Accreditation and School Improvement, commonly referred to as SACS. SACS is an accrediting agency recognized by Georgia law, specifically in subparagraph A of paragraph 6 of Code Section 20-3-519. And SACS is an accreditation division of advanced ed. On December 17, 2012, SACS Advanced Ed placed the DeKalb County school system on accredited probation for school governance and leadership reasons. Probation is the level of accreditation preceding loss of accreditation. And the State Board was notified of this change in accreditation status on December 18th of 2012. Within 30 days of that notice, specifically on January 17th of 2013, the State Board held a hearing after proper notice to determine whether the State Board would recommend to the Governor that the members of the local board of the DeKalb County Board of Education should be suspended from pay. After commencement of the hearing, the State Board entered into a consent order signed by each member of the local board, consenting to certain facts and agreeing to suspend the hearing to a later point in time. The State Board then voted to reconvene the hearing today on February 21st, and proper notice was given to all parties. What will the evidence show today? Specifically, that DeKalb County schools were placed on accredited probation for 5 governance-related reasons. First, the DeKalb County Board of Education failed to establish policies and support practices that ensure effective administration of the system and its schools. The evidence will show that the local board does, in many cases, have appropriate policies in place. However, members of the board simply ignore or fail to follow these policies. Second, the board fails to operate responsibly and function effectively. The evidence will show that they've struggled mightily within the last several months, multiple votes, to even elect a board chair. Third, the local board fails to ensure that leadership at all levels of the school system has the autonomy to meet goals for achievement and instruction and to manage day-to-day operations effectively. I believe the evidence will show that members of the board engage in micromanagement, violate policies related to staff and board communications regularly. Fourth, the local board and staff at all levels of the DeKalb County school system fail to foster a culture consistent with the school system's purpose and direction. As we listen to the evidence today, I want you to have your ears open for when the students are the primary focus of the DeKalb County Board of Education, when student achievement is the primary focus of this board. Fifth, the local board fails to engage stakeholders effectively in support of the school system's purpose and direction. At the conclusion of this hearing, excuse me, I believe that the evidence will show that good cause exists for the State Board of Education to move forward with a recommendation to the governor to suspend with pay all eligible members of the DeKalb County Board of Education. Please note that I will not be seeking the suspension of the three recently elected local board members. These three new members were not members of the DeKalb County Board of Education at the time the system was placed on probation. Accordingly, in my view, they are not eligible under the statute to be suspended. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Please allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm Bob Wilson. I'm an attorney and I'm practicing the driving metropolis of DeKalb.
Mr. Wilson, I don't speak up a little bit, speaking up.
Do I need something more than, I don't want to have to plug this thing, so I'll speak up. Please allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm Bob Wilson. I'm an attorney and I practice in the driving metropolis of DeKalb. I'm joined today by my law partner, Ms. Carrie Ware. The two of us will be representing the DeKalb County School Board today. I do not envy your task. None of us do. I'm sure when you accepted the responsibility to serve on the State Board of Education, you weren't particularly thinking about days like today. But we appreciate your service. The law says this matter has to be heard before you, and I'm sure that you will do your best to be as fair as possible. I recognize, and I would be foolish to say otherwise, that there has been some degree of a firestorm, a lot of it through the media, around the DeKalb County School Board. I ask you, as those who have to decide here today, try to eradicate a lot of that from your mind, all of it, and listen to what is presented to you. I have faith that people are fair. I have faith that people try to do the right thing. Sometimes it's darn hard to do the right thing. And we all know that. Sometimes it's easy just to go with the flow. I think the evidence today is going to show you some things in the past about the DeKalb County School Board that are not pleasant. And we recognize that SACS has made findings that are not positive. But we're going to show you some other things. There's progress being made. There is significant progress being made. We intend to show you that in the last 2 years, the majority of that board has been changed by the electorate. The ballot box was ahead of SACS. We expect you to see that a majority of that board only came to it in the last 2 years. 2 came 2 years ago at the beginning of 11, and 3 came in the beginning of this January. Because the citizens spoke for change. And that ought to matter as you go through your day. Because much of what you're going to see will not be related to the majority of those who are on this board. And the majority that was there isn't there any longer. You're going to find that a new superintendent has been appointed. Keep in mind that the primary focus, as you look at this evidence, of the Sachs report is about governance and leadership issues. You're going to find that a new superintendent was appointed whose background is in governance and leadership. And that in the short time he has been there, a change is underway. The school board has, in fact, elected a new chair. The school board has, in fact, as you will see from the evidence, elected a new vice chair. The new chair, Dr. Melvin Johnson. The new vice chair, Jim McMahan, are new to the board. Neither of those gentlemen were even on the board when the board was placed on rotation. They have put new leadership in place over that board. They have put new leadership in place over the administration. Those moves are clearly being done because Sachs said you have a governance and leadership issue. So we expect the evidence to show you that that has been done. We expect the evidence to show you that some of the facts that are laid out in the Sachs report are because of misinformation, we believe, being given to Sachs are not correct. Things that on the surface look very disturbing relating with the controls of money and textbooks are wrong. Dealing with connections to the internet are wrong. Not necessarily because Sachs got it wrong, but because someone gave them incorrect information. You're going to find, I believe from the evidence, that there is a new day, and that progress towards each and every single solitary goal that Sachs presented is being made. Significant progress. And that this new board, this new superintendent, we expect the evidence to show you, are making significant and substantial gains towards resolving the very issues that Sachs brought to them. No system can run, from the evidence, I think you'll find, very well without good governance and good leadership. That is why Sachs stepped in. The public was ahead of them, I think you'll find from the evidence, by changing the majority of that board over the last 2 years. And what that group has done has addressed exactly what Sachs has asked them to address. As we move into this evidence today, I know that the Department of Education, the state, will present evidence that is not pleasant. Time reference some of it. Does it predate the majority of this board? The majority of the people that the electorate have placed in? Does it not? What I ask of you through the day is what I would ask of anybody listening to facts and trying to weigh your responsibility. Keep an open mind, all the way to the end. Listen to what is presented to you. Believe in the good nature, good faith of people, and make judgments based upon what you see and hear in these proceedings today. I said we would not try to infringe in any way on moving through this process. But in order to move through it, we do have to take a little time. We will not try to elongate it. We will try to stay on point. We ask that you pay close attention, which I know you will. We ask that you keep an open mind. All we want is a fair consideration of what is being presented. That's all we can have. And I thank you in advance for that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Hackemeyer, are you ready to proceed?
At this time, I would like to ask that the board take judicial notice of its earlier consent order in this case, dated January of 2013, and the facts consented to at that time by each member of the DeKalb County Board of Education and the attorneys representing the board or individual board members. You can review this document at moving parties exhibit number 24. And with your permission, I would like to read the first several paragraphs of this order into the record. The DeKalb County School District, the DeKalb County Board of Education, the local board, the members of the local board, and the State Board of Education, the state board, do agree to and do hereby enter into this consent order and agreement, including any findings of fact and conclusions of law contained herein, unless a specific finding of fact or conclusion of law is expressly noted herein as being the currently unsubstantiated representation of one or more of the parties to this agreement and included for informational purposes only. 1. On or about December 17, 2012, the school district was placed on the status of accredited probation by SACS Council on Accreditation and School Improvement, Inc., SACS CASI, doing business as SACS and as Advanced Ed, and sometimes collectively referred to herein as SACS. SACS is an accrediting agency, as that term is defined in OCGA Section 20-3, 519, 6.1a. The status of accreditation is the level of accreditation, the status of accredited probation is the level of accreditation immediately preceding loss of accreditation. The school district was placed on accredited probation for, among other things, school board governance reasons. The state board received notice from Advanced Ed on December 18, 2012 that the school district had been placed on accredited probation. The current members of the local board are Dr. Eugene Walker, Dr. Melvin Johnson, Ms. Nancy Jester, Mr. Marshall Orson, Ms. Sarah Copelin-Wood, Mr. Jim McMahan, Mr. Jesse J. Cunningham, Jr., Mrs. Donna Edler, and Dr. Pam Speaks. The state board properly noticed a hearing to be held on Thursday, January 17, 2013, to determine whether the state board would recommend to the governor that members of the local board should be suspended with pay. The school district, the local board, and the members of the local board received notice to that hearing. Prior to the scheduled hearing on January 17, 2013, the local board, the members of the local board, the school district, and counsel for the state board worked on a mutual substantive consent order to be presented to the state board on January 17, 2013. Despite these efforts, after commencing the January 17, 2013 hearing, the state board rejected the negotiated consent order submitted during the hearing. The local board, the members of the local board, and the state and the school district have therefore requested that the January 17, 2013 hearing be suspended to allow them additional time to prepare for the remainder of the hearing. And that concludes that part of my request that you take judicial notice of those facts. And I'm now ready to call my first witness.
Mr. Wilson, any objection?
No objection. Thank you, Your Honor.
I call Dr. Mark Elgart. Where would we like the witness to sit? Is it here? Or,
I believe before we had him at the podium and or one of the other podiums, whatever.
and you want me to be here?
Yes.
All right. Dr. Elgart?
You've got a mic right here.
Can you hear me now? No? Testing? Madam Clerk Reporter, would you swear the witness, please? Would you state your full name and place of employment for the record?
Mark Elgart, and I work for Advanced Education.
And what is your educational background?
I have been in education for 33 years. First 7 years serving as a high school math and science teacher, and then 8 years in administration at the middle and high school and central office level. The last 18 years I've worked in the field of accreditation for the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools.
And in what capacity are you presently employed?
I'm the president and CEO of Advanced Education.
And what are your duties for Advanced Ed?
Responsible for the executive leadership over our organization, which includes not only our accreditation work, but also we have divisions of information educational technology, research and development, and legal and human resources.
And what is the relationship between Advanced Ed and SACS or SACS CASI?
Advanced Ed operates 3 of the 6 regional accrediting agencies in the country, of which SACS CASI is one of them, operating in 11 southeastern states of the United States.
And how long have you been working with schools or school districts in attaining accreditation?
18 years as a staff member, another 7 years as a volunteer. I've been in this line of work for 25 years either as a volunteer or staff member.
And how many schools does Advanced Ed accredit approximately?
Approximately 26,800 in 71 countries.
And how many school systems does Advanced Ed accredit approximately?
Fully accredited under our district model, of the 15,000 systems we work with, 1,500 are accredited through our systems model.
And that includes the DeKalb County Board of Education?
Yes.
And you said these schools and school systems are regionally located?
We have schools and school systems throughout this country and 71 countries abroad.
And in the time you have been with SACS and Advanced Ed, how many schools, school systems, and other educational entities have sought accreditation under your authority, approximately?
Each year, approximately 5,000 schools and school systems have to renew or retain accreditation for the first time. So we conduct accreditation reviews to about 5,000 institutions annually.
And can you explain to this board why accreditation is important in public schools?
We do public and private, but for the public, we are recognized in all 50 states as a regional accrediting agency under either SACS, North Central, or Northwest, and also recognized by the federal government for this purpose of K-12 level. And K-12 education is very important, as in any professional industry like healthcare, legal, even your police departments and fire departments. Accreditation is an independent process by which professionals conduct evaluations of these entities for the purpose of providing quality assurance that they are meeting standards that are set by the profession for the purpose of evaluating the effectiveness and success and quality of these institutions. And in many states, in states like Georgia, they use accreditation in some form as a recognized methodology to ensure the success and effectiveness of these institutions, but also their improvement. So states use them for scholarship purposes, like Georgia. They use them for state accountability systems. It's a criteria within the state accountability system. They use them for regulatory functions to ensure that state laws are carried out, not only to meet the compliance elements of the regulation by state and federal law, but also do it in an effective manner. So every state has a different methodology aligned with accreditation, but all 50 states use accreditation in some form as an independent professional evaluation of the quality of the public schools in that state.
And does your organization have standards for accreditation?
We establish standards that are based on research for educational institutions and the quality of those institutions.
And I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to bring me my black notebook and one of the notebooks that exhibits for Dr. Elgart. And Dr. Elgart, I'm going to direct your attention to Exhibit 19 for the moving party. And you'll see tabs there, and ask if you can identify it for the record.
tab 19.
Yes, tab 19.
Tab 19 has our accreditation policies and procedures. Correct? What do you want? Is it tab 18?
Tab 18, I apologize.
Tab 18 is our advanced ed standards for quality that apply to school systems seeking our district accreditation.
And so these are the standards that would apply to DeKalb County, is that correct?
That is correct.
And how many standards are there?
We have 5 standards, and there are 34 indicators within those 5 standards.
And would you read those 5 standards into the record just briefly?
Standard 1 is on purpose and direction. Standard 2, governance and leadership. Standard 3, teaching and assessing for learning. Standard 4, resources and support systems. Standard 5, using results for continuous improvement.
And how do these standards relate to the mission of school systems?
They're critically important. The first standard on purpose and direction gives us an understanding of what the institution or system is seeking to accomplish and how they're seeking to accomplish it. That gives us our lens on how we start to evaluate the effectiveness of the school system, particularly in the area of teaching and assessing for learning, to ensure that the curriculum, the instructional practices, and the expectations for student learning are aligned with the mission, purpose, and direction of the system.
And do any of these standards relate specifically to school board governance?
Standard 2, governance and leadership.
And you mentioned earlier indicators. Can you explain what an indicator is?
An indicator defines the elements of the standard. For instance, under teaching and learning systems, curriculum, instructional design, and assessment practices guide and ensure teacher effectiveness and student learning across all grades and courses. Then we have, as with this standard, most of our indicators are under this standard, and they define that statement, what it means in practice, and the schools use that to guide their instructional design and delivery.
And how many indicators are there for governance and school leadership?
There's
Page
5 or 6. 6 indicators under governance and leadership.
Turning now to the accreditation process, can you briefly explain to the State Board how the quality assurance review process works?
Our schools and school systems are required once every 5 years on a regular cycle to prepare for an external evaluation. In preparation for that external evaluation, we have a procedure they go through to gather evidence of the institutional's quality and to have the stakeholders in that institution examine that evidence, analyze it, and identify areas in which they are performing at or above expected levels, areas where they have identified that they need improvement. So we begin by asking them to take stock of their performance results. What are the performance metrics that a school or school system uses to determine, are they being successful with the students they serve? So certainly in the public arena, they begin with any state criteria that's required of them, either through a state accountability system or state testing. We ask them to examine the performance results, and then we give them a series of diagnostic tools to examine those results in the context of those tools. Most of those tools are aligned with and reinforce the standards for accreditation. They render their own self-analysis in preparation for an external review. During that time, we begin to analyze what the school or school system has gathered. It's all in a web-based system, so we have access to what they're doing and what they're thinking and what they're determining. We appoint a group of professionals to come in and conduct that external review. And they'll do that on an agreed-upon time frame. It's usually a 2 to 4 day process that will be on-site, but it's a 6 to 8 month process from preparation for that team to conduct the on-site and their work after the on-site. So during the on-site, the team applies our diagnostic tools around applying our standards, examines student performance results, and examines the institution's commitment to its ongoing improvement and how it plans to address the needs of students moving forward. After that review, an independent evaluation is written of the school and school system. It includes areas where we've identified practices that are noteworthy in a positive way. We've provided them with opportunities, not requirements, but opportunities for further improvement. and finally provided them with required actions. These are actions they must take to retain their accreditation as they move forward. And they must complete those required actions normally within a 2-year period.
And do these reviewers, these professionals that you mentioned, have special credentials or training?
We train all the individuals who serve on our teams. They are regular training on an annual basis, but the people who lead these teams are actually contracted individuals for Advanced Ed and its regional accrediting agencies. They're called lead evaluators, and they receive specialized in-depth training to lead these visits, to make sure that the teams operating on them do in accordance with our policies and our procedures and carrying out the work that we expect of them.
Would you turn now to Exhibit 6? I ask if you can identify it for the record, please.
Exhibit 6 is a report of the Quality Assurance Review Team for DeKalb County School District, and it is dated March 4th, 2012 to March 7th, 2012.
And are quality assurance reviews an activity that is conducted regularly by Advanced Ed?
We conduct 5,000 of these annually.
Would you explain to the State Board what a special report is in the accreditation process?
Special report is something that may happen between the regular cycle of review. As I said earlier, we're in schools, in school systems, once every 5 years on a regular cycle. But we reserve the right in our policies that there's a matter of importance that questions the ability of a school or school system to continue to meet our standards, that we may conduct a special review or a series of special reviews between those regular cycles of evaluation.
And is there a process for conducting these special reviews?
There's a detailed process which all of our schools and systems are aware of, and that process generally is triggered by a written, signed, acknowledged concern or complaint from somebody within the system or within the community that is concerned or questions whether or not the school or system is continuing to meet the accreditation requirements.
So could one written complaint trigger a special report?
It's possible that one could. We receive them weekly. I would say that over 90% of the ones we receive are more to do with an individual concern of an individual matter. We do not act on those. But when there is called into question an entire school or school system's ability to meet standards, and a complainant can identify the basis for that concern, we begin our process if there is the possibility that they would not meet a standard for accreditation.
And briefly explain to us what that process is in terms of how you interact with the school district.
Once we receive it, and we've evaluated that it has the potential, we've made no determination at this point, we send a letter on to the superintendent, whoever is the chief executive of that school or school system. We identify the concern, and we give that individual, as the responsible chief executive of the school or school system, 30 days to respond to that concern. And once we receive that back, we then evaluate the nature of the response, the nature of the concern, and if it's been satisfied, then the matter could be closed. Another option is there could be some concerns there, and we just tell the superintendent or head of school that we're going to continue to monitor the situation. We identify ways in which we want that chief executive to ensure that the matter is addressed in a proactive manner. Or third, we may say, we can't make a determination based on what we've learned thus far. The only way we can make it is to independently go in of the complainant and of the schools to make an independent evaluation of whether or not the school or school system is meeting the standard.
And what do you do in that case?
We send in a highly trained, these are people who are more trained than the people who do our regular reviews, to go in and conduct an independent investigation on whether or not the school or school system is meeting the standards for accreditation that are identified through this process.
And how many reviewers go?
Depends on the nature of it. It could be anywhere from 3 to 7 people, because usually it's a focused review in a particular area. It is not a full evaluation of a school or school system.
And turning your attention now to Exhibit 3, can you identify that for the record, please?
This is a report of the Special Review Team for DeKalb County School System on January 24th through 26th, 2011.
As part of your process, either for the special review team or the 5-year review, do your trained professionals interview stakeholders?
That's a part of the process. They do that typically after we've gone through a period of analysis before coming on site, and that is done in collaboration and cooperation with the school or school system in question.
And who would your typical stakeholders be?
Well, we ask the school or school system to identify the individuals who can report directly on the matter of concern. So, for instance, if it's a governing matter, all we would say to the school system is, in addition to your board and superintendent, who else? So the school system selects who else should be identified in that process of interviews. If the particular problem has to do with financial matter, we would say, in addition to your board and superintendent, your chief financial officer, because that's the person responsible for it. But in addition to that, you identify who else has direct knowledge or who else you believe should be part of this process. It's a very collaborative process in which the system has a significant amount of responsibility to coordinate and identify those who would be interviewed.
And do you identify those who are interviewed by name in your reports?
We do not, however, the system and us have a list of all those, the schedule, who's interviewed, when they're interviewed, what their role is. It's known to the system who generated it. It's known to everybody who's involved in the evaluation, who's come in, been interviewed. But we don't depend on the testimony or the interview of just one individual. If one individual says it, it doesn't make it into the report unless it's been verified and corroborated through multiple sources of evidence beyond simply an individual's account of a situation. We look for documentation, video evidence, audio, text evidence to support whatever has been identified as a concern. And we look for other individuals, whether or not they agree or share that concern.
Directing your attention now to Exhibit 1, can you identify this document for the State Board of Education?
So the letter sent by me to, at the time, the interim superintendent, Ramona Tyson, to request for information dated July 28, 2010.
And what's the purpose of sending a request for information generally?
This is to determine, in the first paragraph, to determine if further review of the school system is necessary to confirm compliance with standards. And so we had asked for 7 different areas of information from the system to determine whether or not they are in compliance with standards required for accreditation.
And then would the school district respond?
They'd have 30 days to respond.
And is a request for information such as Exhibit 1 an activity that is conducted regularly, or a document that is sent out regularly by advanced ed?
Regular is, no. It is only in situations of significant concern.
But when those areas of significant concern are raised through a complaint process, then the first step might be to send out a request for initial information.
Yes.
And are there levels of accreditation for school systems?
Yes, there are.
And what are they?
Accredited, and then there are sanctions of advised, warned, or probation.
And how does the school system move up or down the ladder of accreditation?
Depends on their ability to provide evidence and demonstrate that they meet the standards for accreditation and each of the indicators within those standards. And school systems, for instance, of the schools visited this past fall, we were in 1,000 schools, a little over 1,000 schools and school systems. Approximately 50% of them at the end of that review were placed on one of those categories of advised, warned, or probation. Those categories are used to identify not only the areas for improvement, but to give them direction for improvement. It is not unusual, in fact, the common practice that after review, A school or school system will have areas for improvement that are required. They will more than likely be in one of the categories advised, warned, or probation, and they will be given opportunity to address those during our prescribed period of time.
And after the prescribed period of time, what happens?
If they can demonstrate improvement, they'll move up the ladder from wherever they start. If they can't demonstrate improvement, they could either stay or move down that ladder. But the different categories tend to define the seriousness or the scope of the issues. Advised, and generally we're saying, these are important matters and we would like you to address them within a 2-year period. Warned, it's an important matter, very, more important than the advised, and more complicated. Really, these matters, you really should substantially improve upon them within a year, year and a half. Probation is the most serious, and you must address these within a year's time. That if you do not address them as a school or school system, there are serious repercussions that can impact the quality of teaching and learning in the school or school system and negatively impact the performance of students.
So how does advanced ed determine that a system should be placed on probation? Are there standards or criteria?
There's standards, and each one of these indicators has rubrics. There's 4 levels to the rubrics. And the rubrics, level 1 is minimum or no evidence of supporting meeting that indicator. Level 2, there's some evidence, but there's still significant concern. Level 3 is generally where we see an effective or operational performance relative to the indicator, and level 4 is generally above the performance we normally expect. So the school or school system knows which level they're on, and by looking at that level and looking at the next level, they know what it takes to improve. They use those rubrics to identify specifically the pathways to improvement to address the noted concerns.
So is it unusual for a school system to be, well, let me ask you this way. What are the usual reasons that a school system is placed on probation in terms of your standards? Are some more commonly at issue than others?
Well, if I can refer to the most recent, this fall, in which the DeKalb County schools were also in this grouping of schools and school systems that we reviewed. In the fall for schools, as I said earlier, about 50% of the schools came out of that process accredited, 30% on advisement, 12% on warned, and 3% on probation. In our systems that we did, 30% came out accredited, 42% advised, 26% warned, 2% on probation. The vast majority of the reasons why they were placed in advised, warned, or probation had to do with teaching and assessment for learning. Only one school system in this nation, as I said, there was 1,000, was placed on probation for governance issues. That would be the DeKalb County schools.
At this time, I would like to have Dr. Elgart identified as an expert witness in the area of probation for school systems in the United States.
Any objection, Mr. Wilson? No. Go ahead.
Dr. Elgart, it sounds like you're familiar with the DeKalb County school system in Georgia.
Yes.
And how are you familiar with it?
Well, first off, I've been in the area for 18 years, but I've been interacting directly through my role with the DeKalb County school system since 2003, over the last 10-year period. I've had direct interactions with the board. I've had direct interactions with, over that period of time, 4 superintendents. I have conducted training at their request during that period of time. I have met individually and in small groups with board members during that period of time. I have also addressed the board in its entirety at publicly called board meetings during that period of time.
So you have had personal interactions with the DeKalb County Board of Education.
I have.
And you said you met with them collectively over a period of time, I believe?
Yes.
When did these events occur?
Well, most recently, during a period of time in which Tom Bowen was chair, it was in the spring of 2011, at his request and other members of the board, they started to meet with me in smaller groups, not to violate the public meeting laws, in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. And at that time, to asked for my guidance when they were struggling with the superintendent search process. Those series of meetings led to, later that spring, at their request, I began conducting sessions with them, which normally were 2 to 3 hour sessions, which had a training focus and also had a mediation focus to help them mediate through the differences that they were experiencing in being able to carry out their duties as members of the Board of Education. Those meetings, which began in the late spring of 2011, continued every month or two until the late spring of 2012.
And why did they stop?
It was that, they asked me to conduct those meetings were, there was no contractual relationship, there was no cost to these meetings. It was they volunteered or asked me to do them for them, and you'd have to ask them. That is a decision that they made, but I just made myself available and was more than willing to help them professionally through this period of time.
Is that a little unusual for you to be that directly involved with the members of the board?
Yes.
Directly?
Yeah, it is not usually part of my job description.
I direct your attention now to exhibit number 4 and ask that you identify it for the record, please.
The letter dated March 3rd, 2011 to the interim superintendent, Ramona Tyson, in front of me, regarding a cover letter to a report of a monitoring team visit to the system.
And I direct your attention to the second paragraph of that letter and ask you to read it into the record, please.
Based on the findings in the special review team report and subsequent review and action by the Advanced Ed Accreditation Commission, the school system has been placed on accredited on advisement status.
And turning now to exhibit number 3 and page 4 of exhibit number 3.
Yes.
Did the special review team note any concerns related to Standard 2, governance and leadership?
Yes, they noted 5 indicators under that standard, which at that time, we revise our standards and update them every 5 years. It was an earlier version of the standards, but there were 5 areas which they noted.
And would you read those indicator numbers into the record, please?
Just the number?
Just the number?
Indicator 2.1, 2.4, 2.5, 2.11, and 2.12.
And I guess since your numbers have changed, maybe we should characterize each of these indicators or perhaps read them into the record, sir.
2.1 is that this governing board establishes and communicates policies and procedures to provide for the effective operation of the system. 2.4, the governing board implements policies and procedures, provide for the orientation and training of the governing board. 2.5, the governing board builds public support, secures sufficient resources, and acts as a steward of the system's resources. 2.11, under leadership, the leadership provides internal and external stakeholders meaningful roles in the decision-making process to promote a culture of participation, responsibility, and ownership. 2.12, assesses and addresses community expectation and stakeholder satisfaction.
And was the school district required to take any corrective actions as a result of this special review team report? Yes.
There were 8 corrective actions listed in the report beginning on page 11.
Would you briefly explain to the state board what a required action is and how you follow up on it?
Required action is an outcome, one of the outcomes of a review, whether that's a regular review or a special review. And by the term required, these are areas which action is required of the school or school system that they must address to satisfy the requirements for accreditation, continued accreditation. And normally schools or school systems have 2 years to fully address these. However, when they're placed in a category of advised warrant probation, the amount of time they have to address them is a shorter cycle.
You've already identified the quality assurance review. I direct your attention now to Exhibit 9 and ask if you can identify it for the record.
Number 9 is a letter dated September 18, 2012, to the superintendent of schools, at that time, Dr. Cheryl Atkinson, from me, indicating that we are going to conduct an on-site investigation of DeKalb County schools to determine whether or not they are meeting standards related to governance and leadership and resources and support systems.
Going back to the quality assurance review, exhibit number 6, and turning to page 8 of that report. Take a moment and quickly review pages 8 and 9 and 10 of that report.
This is a report of a regular review. They were scheduled for a regular review, which was conducted. This is March of 2012. The first required action was establish and enforce a policy that board members honor the chain of command when communicating stakeholders.
And how many other required actions were there?
There were 5 more, total of 6.
And how many of those required actions relate to school board governance in your view?
One directly.
Did the accreditation status of the DeKalb County school system change after the quality assurance review?
I believe after this review, they remained on advisement because it co-joined to this review the results of the monitoring visit that I mentioned, we referenced prior, which had 5 elements there, but they remained, I believe, you've got to read the.
If you turn to Exhibit 7,
Yeah. Exhibit 7 is a letter to Dr. Atkinson from myself, dated August 28, 2012. It's a request for information because we've received numerous complaints regarding potential violation of SACS, KC, or advanced ed standards and policies.
and what 2 standards were of concern in this letter?
Governance and leadership and resource and support systems.
And what was the purpose of this letter to then Superintendent Atkinson?
To provide the superintendent 30 days to respond to these 2 standards, and in particular, which was summarized for her in the letter, the areas of concern related to these 2 standards.
And turning now to Exhibit 9, would you identify it for the record, please?
September 18, 2012, a letter from me to Dr. Atkinson indicating that we will conduct a special review on the dates of October 17 to 19, 2012.
Does it indicate that she did in fact respond to your request for information?
She did.
And again, what standards are implicated of concern in this letter?
Governance and leadership, resources and support systems.
And let's turn now to exhibit number 10 and flip past the first 2 pages. And I ask if you can identify this document for the record.
a report of a special review team for the DeKalb County Schools. Review dates October 17 through 19, 2012. It was conducted by Advanced Ed and Science Casey.
And what accreditation standards were of concern in this report?
The primary concern was governance and leadership and resources and support systems.
And would you indicate the indicators, please, at the bottom of page 2 of that report that were indicated?
Indicators under governance and leadership, there are 5 indicators: 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5. And under resource support systems, there were 7, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, and 4.7.
Please turn to page 17 and 18 of Exhibit 10 and identify this section of the report.
This is the required action section of the report.
Take a minute or two and look at these required actions. Okay, turning first to required action number 11 on page 18. Does the report indicate when this required action was first issued?
The special review team of January 2011 had identified this required action.
And why does it appear here?
Because it's yet to be satisfied, which is to establish the district strategic planning team for the purpose of implementing a strategic plan to guide the direction of the district.
And turning back to the previous page, looking at required actions 5 through 10, does the report indicate when those required actions?
These came from the regular review that was conducted in March 2012, and these are 6 required actions that have yet to be satisfied from the March 2012 evaluation.
And so then what are the first 4?
The first 4 are from the special review team that visited the system in October 2012. And those are, for the first time, being noted to the system and asking them to take appropriate action.
And do these required actions also implicate school board governance in your view?
These 4 relate to school board governance and resources and support systems.
Okay, turning now to Exhibit 11. I ask you if you can identify these.
The letter dated December 17, 2012, to Dr. Atkinson, Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Walker, Chair of the DeKalb County Board of Education. The transmittal letter or cover letter to the report of the special review team to the district on October 17 and 19, indicating that the system, as a result of this visit, has been placed on accredited probation.
Would you please read into the record the second paragraph of your letter?
As the report indicates, there is significant and irrefutable evidence that the school system is in a state of conflict and chaos. The current status of the school system is a result of at least a decade of decline. The system over the past decade has struggled with consistent and effective governance. This failure to govern effectively has resulted in a decline in student performance, financial mismanagement, and lack of integrity and ethics in recruiting, appointing, and evaluating personnel at all levels of the school system. The system must immediately take aggressive and assertive steps to address all of these challenges.
What did you mean, Dr. Elgart, when you referred to a decade of decline in the DeKalb County school system?
Well, first and foremost, the system under NCLB has never met AYP. They've never met AYP. Their performance results over 11, 12 years have been fairly stagnant. There hasn't been any significant improvement over that period of time. Secondly,
If I may, you mentioned AYP and you mentioned NCLB. Would you explain briefly what those are?
NCLB is commonly is the common name No Child Left Behind, which is really the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the SEA, which was, I believe, I may not have my dates right, but I believe it was approved by the United States Legislature and the President at the time, President Bush, in 2001, which required all states to enact accountability systems in accordance with that act.
And AYP?
AYP is a federal designation which all states were required to create accountability plans to identify whether schools meet adequate yearly progress as defined through the federal regulations. And DeKalb County, during that period of time, I believe 2003 might have been the very first year in which the state of Georgia was fully implementing that law, has never met AYP.
That's not surprising.
Had the DeKalb County Board of Education had accreditation problems earlier?
Yes, in 2004, the DeKalb County school system was placed on accredited probation for governance issues. And what's remarkable about that, in preparing for testimony today, I read the reports back in 2004, and many of the same issues that exist today relative to governance existed in 2004. During the last 10 years, there have been only 2 years where DeKalb County under accreditation have not been under a sanction of some sort of advised warrant of probation. It's a 10-year period which, despite changes in the board, despite 4 superintendents, there's been a decade of continued ineffective governance which clearly support a pattern of inefficiencies in the operating environment where people are becoming part of that environment and reinforcing ineffective or inappropriate practices of the past, and they continue today. But the concerns in 2004 are replicated again today around governance and leadership of the school system.
How long did it take the school system to get off probation in 2004?
To get back to fully accredited, almost, I believe it was almost close to 4 years. Probation was probably about 1.5 years.
When will SACS Advanced Ed be going back to the DeKalb County school system to review their progress?
We will host, they are required to host a monitoring team visit no later than May 31st of this year, 2013.
And since your letter to Dr. Walker as the chair of the board and Dr. Atkinson as then superintendent of schools in December 17th, 2012, have you received any evidence or communication from the DeKalb County school system indicating any effort to address their accreditation concerns that you identified?
Communication between the system and my office, there was no communication until this week. And then met with the current interim superintendent. Actually, last Friday, I first had a call from one of the senior staff members and met with him this week.
So putting aside your recent conversation with the new interim superintendent, do you have any confidence that this school district is going to be able to move off probationary status in the 1-year period you referenced earlier?
Our process provides them a year, and mainly because we know in this process, especially in governance, it's a very complex challenge to address. What we hope happens during this period of time is that the system can begin to identify plans that are directly related to improving performance. The concerns here are not a political matter. The concerns here is a performance issue. And what we've witnessed so far from listening, watching the system in the first 2 months is they're treating it like a political matter, not a performance issue. If they are to be successful in the next 10 months, they must, without exception, treat this as a performance issue. It's going to take strong and focused leadership, both in the staff and in the governing board, whoever is in those roles. For 10 years, we've identified a pattern of ineffective governance and leadership of the system. It's a performance issue. It is my hope that under the new superintendent and maybe other changes, that the performance issue that has been clearly a pattern of the system for 10 years can finally be dealt with directly. I'll repeat again, this is not a political matter. This is about performance. And ultimately, the performance that matters more than anything is those of students. And what we want to see as a system, and what we must see of this system in the next 10 months, is not simply just effective governance, but a focus on students and their learning. We've watched videos of every board meeting over the last year. We've engaged this board for a 10-year period. And I can tell you the majority of their discourse, the majority of their debates have little or nothing to do with student achievement. They have to do with how adults relate to one another and what the adults think and in relation to their roles and responsibilities. This system in the next 10 months, we are looking for evidence that they're focused on students. Confidence is a tough thing for me to say we have confidence. We have hope. Our commitment here is we want this system to improve student achievement. We want evidence, not claims, actual evidence that shows they're actually able to do that. We want evidence that they've been able to improve governance, and that evidence isn't in just promises and intent. It's actually seeing them in board meetings talk, direct, and focus on student learning, and do it in a cohesive manner. Cohesive doesn't mean 9-0. It means, are you focused? Because one of the reasons, one thing's been unaddressed, is a committed strategic direction for the system, focused on student achievement. We can ask staff, we can ask board members, there's no cohesiveness around where they're headed. And there hasn't been for 10 years. This is a system that needs to find its way back to what its function is, and that's to improve student learning so kids are successful today in preparation for what they do tomorrow.
I would like to, thank you, Dr. Elgart. I would like to direct the attention of the board now to Exhibit 27, the affidavit of Dr. Mark Elgart concerning Exhibits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11. I would like to move these into evidence, these 10 exhibits, pursuant to the self-authentication provisions of 24-9, 90211, and the exception to the hearsay rule found at OCGA section 24-8-8036.
Mr. Wilson, do you have any objections to those exhibits?
Only as to the report itself, under hearsay. I do not believe it's properly supported. There's been no foundation laid that it's a business record kept in normal course of business, nor is this the highest and best evidence of that business enterprise. But that's basically covered by my standing objection, and I definitely report on those records.
I'm sorry, which number are you objecting to?
The fact report of December 17, 2012, and I believe it is Exhibit 10. I also object to Exhibit 3, which is a special review team report for the same reasons, and Exhibit 6, the quality assurance review team report for the same reasons.
Your Honor, if I may respond to that?
You know, Mr. Wilson, if you would you mind restating those on the record with a mic? I don't believe all the board.
I'm sorry. I can speak up. I'm more than happy to use the mic, but I'm half deaf.
For the webcast, you need to use the mic.
Okay. I'm half deaf to begin with, so I have to depend on artificial ears. So I try not to overspeak. Is this working? All right. I would object to these exhibits, number 3, number 6, and number 10. And that there's been no foundation laid that they are business records kept in the normal course of business as required by the evidence code, that they are blank hearsay and double hearsay. We have no one that we can examine or cross-examine behind those documents, testimonies, interviews, and information contained therein. And for that reason, we object. Plus, we do not believe it's the highest and best evidence. The highest and best evidence would be the information itself that is compiled. Oh, sure. Thank you.
Again, if you turn to exhibit number 27, you will see this affidavit establish the fundamentals of the self-authentication requirements for business records. And rather than have Dr. Elgart go over each of these records individually. We presented this testimony by affidavit. He is here subject to cross-examination. Also, with respect to admissibility of the hearsay, as you know, the evidence code changed on January 1st of this year. And there are now exceptions to the hearsay rule, specifically Section 6. Stacy, if you could come help me here a minute and give this copy of the code to Mr. Wilson and to the hearing officer, that would be very helpful. .803 reads, the following shall not be excluded by the hearsay rule, even though the declarant is available as a witness. Number 6, records of regularly conducted activity, unless the source of information or the method of circumstances of preparation indicates lack of trustworthiness and subject to the provisions of Chapter 7 of this title. A memorandum, report, records, or data compilation in any form of accidents, conditions, opinions, or diagnosis, if made at or near the time of the described events, conditions, opinions, or diagnosis, made by or from information transmitted by a person with personal knowledge and a business duty to report, kept in the regular course of business, regular practice of that business to make the memorandum report. These are admissible. I believe the affidavit satisfies most of those requirements. Dr. Elgart has testified personally about how these documents and reports and correspondence are regular conducted activity of SACS.
Mr. Wilson, any response?
Well, I'm familiar with the evidence code. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I am familiar with the evidence code, but the highest and best evidence are the records of the interviews, the notes, videos, recordings that produce this. None of that has been produced. We don't know who the individuals are who did these interviews, where they did them, when they did them, where the notes are, what they say, because this is an extrapolation. And we have no way of testing the reliability of that information. I mean, we really don't. I'm not questioning Dr. Elgart, but I don't know who interviewed whom in what rooms. And what was said, only what this purports to say that they said that was transferred through someone else who is not standing here. And I do not believe it meets the business exception rule. But I also don't believe that it's the highest and best evidence. So I just stand by that objection.
Thank you.
And I don't want to prolong this. Thank you.
So it's clear your objections are to exhibits 3, 6, and 10.
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right, well, my reading is that they do fit within the business record exception, and I'll overrule the objection. I will advise and instruct the board that to the extent you're concerned of third-party hearsay that may be contained in there, in these individual records, that, they can review that, but not take it for the truth of what's contained by any witness that may be in those reports. But to the extent they're findings and conclusions in the report, I believe is admissible in the business record exception, and that would just be my instruction to the board. Ms. Hackemeyer, will you, to that extent, 3, 6, and 10 are admitted into the record? You identified some other exhibits, or are you tendering anything further?
I believe that is there some specific exhibit you're referring to, Mr. Hearing Officer?
I just want to make sure, are you tendering 1 through 27 in toto right now?
No, I'm not.
That's what I want to make sure what else is being tendered, and make sure if there's an objection from Mr. Wilson.
No, sir. Only those 3 exhibits. Okay.
And I have no further questions for Dr. Elgart at this time.
Were there any, I guess my concern is some other exhibits that you identified. I just want to make sure whether you're going to tender those.
Yes, we have a notebook for the court reporter, and we'll give it to her.
If we identify those so we can have which ones you're tendering so we can have those admitted.
Okay. see, exhibits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and that's it, Your Honor.
Mr. Wilson, no objection to those other than what you stated.
Exactly, Your Honor. Thank you.
So exhibits 1 through 11 are admitted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Elgart, appreciate you being here today.